So actually, I'm just going to go back. We're talking about reducing friction. So that's a theme you've heard quite a lot today, this idea of frictionless experiences. And I think for me, the sort of best way of framing that really is looking at perhaps where digital businesses have really succeeded in creating sort of low effort, low friction touch points for customers. So if you look at the success of somebody like Uber, for example, go back a few years, what was it? It was Friday night, you're coming out of the pub, had a few drinks, it's raining, you stood at the curbside, trying to flag down a taxi in the rain. It's a bit annoying. What do you do now? You're in the pub, you call an Uber, you know exactly within a minute when it's going to arrive, you walk straight out into the car. And we sort of take that for granted now, but it's frictionless, it's easy, and it's kind of nothing to write home about now. It's expected. And that's what we need to be doing within the contact center. So if we look at sort of the adoption of, in particular on this, the sort of voice self-service as a sort of contact channel, as a sort of switch channel. Well, actually, the UK has a fantastic opportunity. We're the third largest market for speech in the world after the US and China. So that really sort of backs up the other research we're seeing. So Alexa itself, which started as a bit of a sort of science project for Amazon, is actually going to be doing 5% of its global revenue by 2021. That's about $15 billion. So, a company that was absolutely keyboard and mouse orientated, doesn't want to speak to people, will actually be doing 5% of its business through a speech channel in just a couple of years' time, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Likewise as well, the Google Home family of products is projected to make $8 billion by 2020 as well. Off the back of that, where are the opportunities for contact centers? Well, again, we come back to where to start initially and look at this value irritant model that Vala referenced earlier. So really, the top right there, that level there is where we want to be having the conversations. It's the difficult, it's the complex, it's the emotional, it's where we can make a difference when we're actually speaking to our customers and where we can really drive value. The other areas, though, and plotting those processes and tasks that you have within the contact center are the areas which are kind of ripe for automation. And there's going to be plenty of use cases for them. So this is really a good place to start. Mapping out those opportunities from a sort of 30,000 feet view and looking at the potential use cases and then driving potential benefits analysis off the back of them. Let's look at a very sort of classic use case within the contact center. Let's give some self-service to customers using identification and verification. So the legacy of that is time-consuming, it's boring for agents, it doesn't keep them engaged. For a customer, it can be quite a frustrating process as well, but it's obviously a necessary requirement for any organization to go through in line with those regulations we were talking earlier about data protection and so on. So on average in the UK, we take about 38 seconds to go through an ID and V process in the contact center. 38 seconds of pretty dead time, pretty boring time, and ineffective time. As I was saying earlier, Forrester tells us that 66% of those contacts still come via that voice channel as well, even in a sort of true omni-channel environment. So you haven't got necessarily the option there to do that sort of pre-authentication, perhaps coming through an app, etc. It's still needing to be done over the voice channel. Off the back of that, though, 85% of customers suggest today, according to BT research, that they're actually dissatisfied with their authentication experience. And that's they don't find it necessarily secure enough, or they find it an overhead, or in some way sort of painful to do. How can we address that? So identification and verification using natural speech and voice biometrics is a particular approach we can use. So it uses a truly unique value, a biometric value, to do that. So it's effectively the customer's voice print can be used to actually do that authentication process. It's already proven, and we're all using it today already. We're using biometric authentication through those smartphone devices that we have, nearly 90% of us have, either through fingerprint, facial recognition on the newer iPhones and Samsungs. So it's a mechanism which people are comfortable with using and do so every day. It's not a capability now as well, which is the sort of preserve of people like HSBC and HMRC. You know, those cost of entry now for delivering this type of technology and capability is much more available now to the sort of mid-market contact center as well. And in fact, again, according to recent research, 90% of consumers, which almost tallies with the mobile saturation, would actually be comfortable using that biometric authentication as a way of getting in and accessing that contact center. So what do we have to do? There's a sort of three-step process really with voice biometrics in terms of an enrollment. So we need to know who you are initially. There's an authentication process that happens. That's a one-time process that we need to go through to capture an example of that customer's voice print. And then that then stays on record and allows us to go into step 2, which is obviously on subsequent and repeat calls, the customer can call in and quite simply just use their voice either with a specific set passphrase or just through natural conversation with an agent to have that IDV process done in kind of sub 5 seconds really when they call in. Finally, it's that adaptation as well. Once we've sort of captured and got an example of that voice print, we can subsequently adapt and tune that to ensure that we're getting an increasing level of accuracy and presenting or preventing any kind of sort of false positives that you might get. So that's the sort of process. Realizing the benefits off the back of that. Well, it depends really on the process. And the particular areas you want to look at, but we can help you sort of define that and what that might look like. But I won't labour the point and go through all of these individually, but there is the typical areas that you might look at around cost per contact, cost per transaction, fraud reduction for ID&V. Every business, pretty much every business consumer organisation has an issue with fraud and the associated costs. So what would it mean if we could actually reduce that down? Repeat calls as well. It's a classic for most customers. Again, stringing out the lack of first contact resolution and the costs associated with those repeat call drivers. Lastly as well, in terms of the switch to digital, I'll give you a quick sort of example of what we're able to achieve there as well. We had an organisation with very hard to predict sort of peaky call volumes. It's very hard to staff for them based on weather conditions and various other challenges. And they'd had reduced resource significantly within the department. So again, we looked at addressing those challenges with a particular application which allowed customers that switch to a digital channel. They were issued a proactive SMS whilst waiting in queue. And actually, the benefit was significant. 60% of the customers who received that SMS actually switched out and elected to book their appointment over that digital channel. Now, when you looked at the costs, £4.50 for the agent-led transaction for the booking of that appointment versus 5p for the digital version. Again, the sort of results speak for themselves, really.